This is All India Radio. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on disaster risk management and disaster risk reduction. The participants are Krishna S. Vatsa, Member, National Disaster Management Authority, and Dr. Manu Gupta, co-founder of SEEDS. And the moderator is Sonu Sood, AIR correspondent.
The International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, celebrated across the globe yesterday, was started in 1989 by United Nations. This year, the theme was speeding up universal access to early warning systems. To discuss the significance of this day and to talk about the crucial aspects of disaster management and disaster risk reduction, we have with us Dr. Krishna Vatsa, Member NDMA, and Dr. Manu Gupta, co-founder SEEDS. A warm welcome to you on All India Radio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Vatsa, to start the discussion, we would like to know from you about the significance of International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction.
It's a day of resolution. It's a day when the disaster management experts, practitioners, and the entire community comes together and deliberates upon some of the important risk-related issues and the challenges that are very prominent today, and how does the community come together to address those challenges. So it's a day of expression of solidarity, it's a day of reflection, and it's a day of deliberation and thinking about the collective means of addressing the challenge. This day was observed by the UN right in the 1989. That was also the time when the International Decade for Natural Disaster Risk Reduction commenced. This was for the first time that international agencies, particularly the UN organizations, got into disaster risk reduction, and together the UN agencies brought a new awareness of the importance of disaster risk reduction, and they also started several initiatives through which they deepened the foundation of disaster management in various countries. So it's a day which has led to a larger international engagement, and I think as a practice area, as an area of engagement, disaster risk reduction has benefited considerably from both the observance of the day as well as the commencement of the International Decade.
Dr. Gupta, coming to you, what are the major objectives behind this initiative?
So the International Day has been brought into force to highlight the importance of disaster prevention, disaster risk reduction, especially in light of how we are looking at mounting losses due to disasters all over the world. Between 1980 to 1990, and then in the last 2 decades, the number of disaster events have been doubling every decade. And obviously in India, we are seeing mounting losses due to these disasters. But a lot of these disasters, the losses are actually avoidable. And that's where the role of risk reduction is very important. So this day actually is to highlight the importance of investing in disaster risk reduction. And in this particular year, 2022, the theme is particularly on early warning, which is to highlight that how early warning can save lives.
Dr. Vatsa, coming back to you, what has been the trend of disasters, frequency and intensity category-wise in the recent years? Is it going up? And if so, why do you think that is happening?
See, there are two broad categories of disasters. One, of course, is the geological disasters, and the other is the climate-related hazards. There is no change in geological hazards or disasters. So far as the climate hazards are concerned, I think there are enough evidence that we are seeing more cyclones, more hurricanes, and also the speed or the ferocity of these wind hazards has increased. Similarly, what we are seeing is that the floods are occurring more frequently, and they are happening in the months which go beyond the rainy season. Generally, we used to have floods during the rainy season, but say in October we have heavy rains and we could have flooding. We have seen flooding in December and January. So not just the frequency of the climate hazards, but also the seasonality of the climate hazards has also changed. And it has really impacted a large number of people in the recent years. Much of it could be attributed to the impact of the climate change.
What would you say about the disaster management ecosystem in India? If we talk about National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, how has it helped in reducing disaster risk and mitigating losses to lives, livelihoods, basic infrastructure?
So NDMA does not work alone. It works as part of a national disaster management system. We have a state level disaster management authorities and we have district level disaster management authorities. NDMA works closely with the states and districts, and all the three-tier institutions has come about as an outcome of the Disaster Management Act 2005. So for the first time, we are seeing a more systematic and legislated process of disaster management. And it has given rise to certain processes, certain systems, and certain capacities that has enabled the states to deal with hazards and disasters much better. What we have seen is that in the recent years, the mortality in disasters has gone down, the process of relief and recovery has improved, and we have seen much greater participation of many agencies, stakeholders, and institutions in disaster management. And this has happened largely due to a more systematic process of interventions, which is supported by NDMA as well as SDMAs and DDMAs. However, there are challenges that still remain to be addressed, and we need to do a lot more in terms of reducing the impact of disasters, addressing some of the underlying causes of disasters and their impacts, and finding long-term solutions, improving recovery of the people who are affected by disasters. So as the disasters increase, as our capacities also increase, so do the people's expectations. And we need to respond to the people's expectations, and we need to improve our capacities and resources for our technical strengths and sophistication also needs to be augmented in response to the new challenges that are coming up.
Dr. Gupta, can you tell us what are the major types of disasters which humanity faces?
The disasters could be, both human-induced, we call them normally man-made disasters, or due to natural causes, which could be, again, due to geophysical reasons like landslides and earthquakes and such like, or hydrometeorological disasters like floods and cyclones and thunder and lightning. Of course, now in recent years, we are also noticing that extreme heat or extreme cold have become disasters in themselves because of the climate change impacts that we are seeing around the world. So broadly, these are the types of disasters that we are talking about when we look at risk reduction.
So you just mentioned that the disasters frequency and intensity has been going up in the recent decades. Can you tell us what are the major reasons for this escalation, and do you feel that it is in our hands to mitigate this to some extent?
Definitely, it is very much possible. It's not too late. While, there are one at larger level causes that is leading to more such disasters, but it all comes down to our own lifestyles and how we are at the root causes of these disasters. So while we are noticing that, in India, the number of cyclones has definitely increased. Earlier, it used to be only in the eastern coast in Bay of Bengal. Now we see more and more cyclones also hitting the western coast from Gujarat to Kerala. The reason is that, the Indian Ocean is warming up, and therefore there are more cyclones getting generated in the Indian Ocean and then subsequently to Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. But why is that happening in the first place? It is because of climate change, and the reasons for climate change is back to what human activity is all about, and the carbon emissions that we are doing on a day-to-day basis. So it is somewhere our lifestyles, our irresponsible lifestyles over the decades, increasing consumption, irresponsible use of fossil fuels, etc., that has led to these disasters in the first place. So that's one category, and therefore I feel that it's not too late if we start changing our own lifestyles, we start, using less of fossil fuels, moving more towards renewable energy, if we start saving on water, all that little effort each individual does ultimately leads to big change at global level. And that could then somewhere cap that temperature rise that we are seeing. And that in turn will prevent disasters from happening. So in some sense, there is the human activity, all of us in some sense responsible for that kind of loss. And in some way, we can prevent it. The other reason is that, looking at earthquakes, for example, or landslides, these are basically because of irresponsible building activity or making houses in an unsafe way, even though we know that they are built on areas which are along the fault lines. Our Himalayan region, for example, all the states from Jammu and Kashmir till the northeastern states, are on fault lines. And if houses are made safe, we will not suffer from earthquakes or landslides. But rapid explosion of population and not following building codes that are well established in our country has led to these kind of unsafe buildings. And these are the buildings that kill people, unfortunately.
So you feel that it is very important to make our cities resilient, be it by the way of safe construction or by way of water management, environmental protection. And you feel that all stakeholders, governments, citizens, community, industry, entrepreneurs, authorities need to work together on a war footing?
Oh, absolutely. You are bang on. I mean, we have been looking at our urban areas, our cities getting impacted by floods, even with slightly heavy rainfall nowadays. And therefore, I think while we are looking at smart cities and we are looking at technology as solutions, we should also focus on how we can adapt to these kind of climatic changes, improving our drainage, improving our energy consumption patterns. There is one solution that, increasingly cities all over the world are really working on, which is to create natural sponges. So looking at lakes, ponds within urban areas or even other nature-based solutions in urban areas so that they become like sponge and they absorb water, and that can prevent flooding from happening. So you are absolutely right. It requires all local authorities, citizens, even the local private sector, even shopkeepers who may lose their daily income if shops have to close down because of floods. Even they have a stake. So they all can contribute and be part of the change process. And it's very much doable. It's not yet out of hand.
Dr. Vats, would you like to add your thoughts on the problem of cities being more vulnerable to disasters like flooding due to improper drainage systems or reckless construction activity?
The incidence of climate hazards has gone up and it has affected the cities. The cities are receiving torrential rains in a very short spell of time, and it has led to flooding. Several cities have seen large scale flooding, and also the cities are likely to face the problem of heat waves. So some of these climate impacts need to be addressed through multiple ways. Of course, the city municipal corporations have to take the lead role. They need to take up and implement programs that reach out to the people. Along with the municipal corporations, we also need the private sector, the NGOs, and the communities to come together and address these issues. This is not just about one particular measure, it's about a series of civic measures that improve the efficiency of the systems, the stormwater drainage, the natural drainage, and the normal precautions that the people need to take whenever they are struck with such emergencies. So this has to be a multi-pronged effort. At the level of NDMA, we are starting a large-scale urban flood management program, which will be implemented first in the largest 7 cities of the country. So this is an area where we are very much engaged with, and we are keen to work with the city level governments and various other institutions to reduce the impact of climate hazards.
Moving on, Dr. Gupta, the emergency management cycle usually has 4 stages: mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery. So do you feel that the focus should be on mitigation and preparedness so that requirement of response and recovery gets minimized?
Correct. Unfortunately, we have been spending too much on response. And, if you look at the national figures, our spending in the last 2 decades has doubled as the number of disasters have. And the latest report of the 15th Finance Commission is already advocating that we need to increase our budget for mitigation and preparedness. Unfortunately, the psyche of the system is that we will respond to disasters and, as and when they happen, we will try and reach out, which is important. Of course, if people are suffering, we need to save their lives. We need to make sure that they are not affected by diseases and other secondary impacts. But what is important is that if we know, for example, that a cyclone is going to hit my city, my coast, then why don't I prepare accordingly, And that's where the focus should be. And if I want to work even more upstream, I would like to look at how can we, in the first place, prevent any possible loss from cyclone. Now that I know that cyclones are increasing, flooding is becoming more and more frequent, there are ways I can make my house safe, as I said earlier. But also as city authorities, we can have disaster management plans, which is already enshrined in the Disaster Management Act of 2005, that every city, every unit needs to have their own disaster management plan. And all that becomes part of mitigation, investing in resilient infrastructure, investing in, as I said, nature-based solutions, investing in how to ensure that warning reaches people in time and to everybody, especially the poor and the marginalized people.
2 aspects have been emphasized often in mitigating the effect of disasters: access to early warning systems and preparedness. Dr. Vats, how do you see NDMA and the state disaster management authorities? What is the situation right now and what is the road ahead?
In respect to early warning, I think we have made considerable progress. Our early warnings are more accurate. They are more timely. They help people to take suitable action. You might have seen that in case of cyclones and floods, we organize large-scale evacuations, which has reduced mortality. It has happened only due to the improvement in early warning system. We have invested more in this area. We have satellite-based images available. We have also set up INCOIS, which is meant for coastal hazards and tsunami. So these scientific agencies also have worked along with the IMD in improving the early warning system. However, there are again newer challenges that are coming up. For example, we have a problem of lightning, we have a problem of heat waves. Now, these are some of the areas where we need to improve our early warning further. Now, the likely direction of the improvement in early warning is greater decentralization of early warning. We need to make early warning available to the people. It should be available at the block level, district level. So we need more disaggregated early warning information. So that's the likely focus of our work in the area of early warning in the next few years. So far as preparedness is concerned, again, we have improved considerably thanks to the National Disaster Response Force, which the Government of India has set up. It is stationed across the country and it has responded to several calls for help across the states. So it's a very dependable response force and it has really been a pillar of trust for many communities and the governments. The NDRF, of course, needs to be augmented through more state level response force and more presence of local level volunteers In that direction, NDMA is working to set up a system of Apada Mitras. We have set out an ambitious target of training about 1 lakh Apada Mitras across the country, and we will scale it up further. So we recognize that preparedness is something that we need to keep investing in. We need to have more local level resources and capacities, but we have made a very good beginning with the NDRF, and we are now slowly augmenting it with the SDRF.
Dr. Gupta, you feel that digitization will help in, making the warning system access faster and more widespread? In fact, in March 2022, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that United Nations will spearhead new action to ensure every person on earth is protected by early warning systems within 5 years. So surely it is a global challenge to, like we say in a heart attack, there is a golden hour. So you feel that here also there is a golden period, which if we are able to, give the warning in, then the losses to lives, livelihoods, to the assets can be much less.
Yes, of course. Improving early warning will definitely lower the potential losses from these disasters. And the way I would look at it is that it's a low-hanging fruit. We already have a good department in place. They are able to make quite an accurate prediction. Our challenge is to make sure, like you quoted the UN Secretary General, our challenge is that how do we ensure that the warning reaches to every citizen of our country, and it reaches in a manner that he is able to understand what to do. For me, if I'm told that there is going to be X millimeter of rainfall, I don't know what to do about it. I need to know whether I should just take all my valuables and put them in a higher attic or in a higher elevation so that they don't get damaged, or should I leave my house? Or should I leave my village or my town? I don't know, just basis the quantity of rainfall. So that portion of, information needs to be tailor-made to my context, my needs. And that's where the digitization that you asked is increasingly important. I feel that, with the kind of inclusivity we have been able to build through the financial mechanisms, the UPI systems in India, and many others that we are developing, there is possibility to narrowcast warnings to individuals basis their own profiles that are available. So if I am living in a low-income settlement in the slums of Mumbai, I will be able to get a warning which would be specifically for my type of neighborhood, which is like a kacha houses and low rise. So I need to maybe evacuate. But if I'm living in a multi-storied building, then perhaps I don't need to do anything except that I should not plan any trips to any place and I should stay in my house. So same level of water, but different warning messages to different people in the same city. And that's what we need to do. Digitization can help us reach that scale, which otherwise it's not possible.
Dr. Vats, coming back to you, what has been the role of industry in providing rescue and rehabilitation where required through their corporate social responsibility efforts?
We work quite well with the private sector, with the industry associations. We work well with the FICCI, CII. All these organizations do provide support at the time of large-scale disasters. They too take the burden of recovery and reconstruction. So they are very dependable partners of the government, and they have helped us on many occasions. This relation could be improved further through more formal arrangements. I think this is the area of work which we will like to pursue further.
Dr. Gupta, what's your take on the role corporates can play through CSR initiatives in helping in disaster management? Also, what role do new startups or entrepreneurs play in bringing community-led solutions for mitigating risks from disasters?
I feel personally that, it's not just the government that has to play its role. All of us, the citizens, civil society organizations, NGOs, as well as the private sector, have a very important role to play. Now, for example, I spoke about early warning, and this early warning is a very important piece of information for, let's say, a farmer who has to sow his crop in the right time, and if he knows that it's going to rain and his freshly sowed crops can get damaged, he might want to delay his sowing process. So out here now we are finding a lot of social enterprises coming in, a lot of startups coming in who are able to provide very, very localized warning, and they charge a minimal fee as a subscription or other forms, so that it becomes in a way feasible for these startups. But at the same time, the farmer is able to make a very good decision. So that kind of models can exist. But if you ask me about CSR, there are a number of examples. CSR clearly says in Schedule 7 that companies should invest in disaster management and prevention. And I feel there is now a rising awareness around this issue. So they can invest in rejuvenation of water bodies around, like lakes, like rivers. They can help in preventing beach erosion. These are projects that are small scale at village level or maybe few villages together, which corporate organizations can definitely support and contribute. So various models are available. It's just that we need to raise the awareness that this investment today will save lives 5 years, 10 years from now. That's where, there is a disconnect. People do not feel the need or the urgency to invest in something that they will see 5 years down the line, and therefore they don't feel the urgency of doing it. But I think the pandemic, the way we saw the impact and the floods this year that we are seeing around us have raised awareness for people to start investing for long-term security, for long-term safety of citizens.
So in reference to international collaboration and international cooperation under the aegis of International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, Dr. Vats, can you tell us something about the Sendai framework? What is this effort and what is its primary goal?
So Sendai framework is a global framework which has been signed by a large number of countries. I think more than 100 countries have signed it, and they have undertaken to implement the pillars of Sendai framework through their disaster management system. So it's about reducing mortality. It's about improving disaster risk assessment and disaster risk governance. It's about improving preparedness and building back better. It's also about understanding risks and investing more in risk reduction measures. So these are very, very important targets that are laid out by Sendai framework. India is committed to implementing it, and we are, through various policies, programs, and frameworks, we have undertaken to implement the Sendai framework across the country. We are monitoring it very closely. Soon we will be producing a report on the implementation of Sendai framework. India is also very conscious of its obligations as a responsible international partner in the area of disaster risk reduction. We have recently set up the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure with an objective of promoting resilience in infrastructure sector. So about 31 countries have joined this coalition. There are several international agencies that have become members of the coalition. So we are now following up Sendai framework in more ways than one. We are committing our resources not just within the country, but beyond the country, and we recognize the interconnectedness of the climate impact across the countries and across the continents.
Dr. Vats, Dr. Gupta, thank you so much for joining us on All India Radio and throwing light on key aspects related to disaster risk reduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You are listening to a discussion on disaster risk management and disaster risk reduction. The participants were Krishna S. Vats, Member, National Disaster Management Authority, and Dr. Manu Gupta, Co-founder of SEEDS, and Moderator Sonu Sood, AIR Correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.